Okay guys, so this video is the first to introduce us to our univariate data unit. Univariate means one variable. Uni means one, variate means variable. So this is data that covers one variable, that measures one variable. So for instance, I could measure the height of all the students in my class, and that would be one variable. And when we have data sets, we want to find measures of center and spread. So a measure of center is either a value or multiple values that attempts to describe a set of data by identifying the central position of the data set. So anything that's written in red, you're going to want to be making sure you write on page 1 of your note packet. So measures of center, what they do is they attempt to describe the data set and kind of make generalizations so that we can make conclusions about the data set. One measure of center is the mean. The mean, another word for mean, is average. So it's the average of a set of numbers. And so to find it, we add up all the values and divide by the number of values in the data set. So for this one, I'm going to add 2 plus 4 plus 5 plus 7 plus 10 and divide by 5 because there's 5 numbers in the data set. So the mean of this data set is 5.6. Another measure of center is the median, which is the middle number. So it's the exact center of the data set. We always want to make sure that we put the data in order first and then find the middle value. So there's two possible situations. The first is that there's an odd number of data points in the data set. So here I have 5 values. So this is my very middle value. So 5 would be my median. The other situation is that there are an even number of data values in the set. And if I have that, I want to find the middle of the two middle numbers by taking their average. So the average of 4 and 5 is 4.5. So the median of this data set is 4.5. Another measure of center is the mode. It's the number that shows up most often. It's important to note that a data set can have no mode if each one shows up the same number of times, or it can have multiple modes. If a number shows up twice and another number shows up twice, and that's the most for the data set, they would both be considered modes. A measure of spread describes how spread out a data set is. So it really tells us how far are my data values going. And so to find the range, we take the difference, or we subtract the two numbers that are the highest and lowest in the data set. Another reason why ordering your data is a good idea. So I would do 12 minus 2 in this case, and my range would be 10. The last important word to note is an outlier. An outlier is a number in a data set that is much bigger or smaller than the rest of the numbers. So 27 would be considered an outlier because it's much larger than the rest of the data set. An outlier could also be much smaller than the rest of the data set. So as we said, we want to describe the center of these data sets using the best measure of central tendency, the best measure of center. So the mean is going to be the best choice when there's no outlier. The median is the best choice when there is an outlier. So for example, this first one has an outlier of 27. It's much larger than the rest. So to describe the center of the data, I'm going to use the median, which is 8. If I calculated the mean of this data set, it would be a number much larger than 8, much larger than the middle of the data set. It would probably be closer to like 10, maybe even 11. That mean is affected by this large number. So we don't want to use the mean because this outlier skews the mean. In this case, though, we're going to use the mean because if I look, these are all pretty much in the same area. There's nothing too big or too small. There's no outlier. So the mean would describe the center best because there's no outlier to affect the mean. So when there's an outlier, use median. When there's not an outlier, use mean. So I want you to try the last two problems on page 2. I want you to calculate the mean, median, and mode, or measures of center, and the range, the measure of spread, and decide which measure of center best describes the data. If it has an outlier, we're going to use the median, and if it doesn't have an outlier, we're going to use the mean. A good first step would be to put the data values in order. So please pause the video and unpause it when you have both problems done. Here are the answers. Notice how the first one, I would use the mean as the best measure of central tendency, because if I look at this data set, there's nothing that's much larger or much smaller than the rest of the data. However, for the second one, I would use the median because 89 is much larger than the rest of the data values. Please make sure you have all the answers correct before stopping the video.